Tim, if you want to come in and join in on camera, I'm gonna switch our graphic and we're gonna switch over. I,
Yes, he did it. He's
I
done
love
it.
it.
Yeah, I had to rock the championship DC teams for the anniversary. So
There you go.
I'm
I
gonna
love
keep
it.
this on as long as it's fairly comfortable.
Yes, sir.
That's hilarious.
You
I
could
love
hear
it.
me, right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you sound great.
All right, good.
Sound even better.
Shout out to Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty hilarious. So for Tim, turn your head sideways so people know who the helmet is. So
It's on the back, but
oh, there
also
you go. Oh yeah, I see it there.
Yeah.
There you go, the Valor. So people who don't know, one of our teams that were part of the we have 4 teams that won the championship within a couple of years, and the Valor were one of them. So it'll be interesting to see if arena football comes back. There is some
there's a
rumblings
story, a rumor.
yeah, rumors, and they might come back. So so that's great. Let me switch our screens up real fast, and I'm going to share our screen over here. We're going to get some scores up. Give me a second, and I will. All right, hold on. I lost the hold on. Sorry, I had to switch the screen back and forth again. There we go. We're back. Luckily, I've done this for enough episodes now that I know when the screen goes blank when I share a screen, how to solve it. So it's take me 5 minutes like it used to. Let me poke and catch Pokemon that's in chat, which is a pretty cool Pokemon, a Grubbin. Again, quick little shout out. Next week, we actually have a Pokemon stream. Every Pokemon that shows up in chat will be drawn into a mural that I'm making to celebrate 500 followers and our 300th show. It'll be Pokemon Day. We'll talk about the latest Pokemon news. We'll have Carly and Andy, 2 of the mods, coming in live. Maybe even have some music be played while I draw, and they'll be reading chat. So definitely come back next week if you care about Pokemon or are interested in an art stream, or if you're live on Twitch and you want to join us for that. Let's get into some Wizards talk. We'll talk about this game very briefly. Last week during the podcast, it was live on air, and things were kind of falling apart for us. We did end up making a little bit of a game of it at a time, but the Warriors were able to, in the end, pull away and get the big win. Porzingis had 34, Bradley Beal had 33, and yet it was not enough for the Wizards. Champ, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Right. So this was a rough game. I think the only positive from this game was the fact that if you wanted Papa John's the next day, you got 50% off. Other than that, there's really not much to say about this one. Yes, the Wizards did shoot 60% from the field, and they were fairly decent from beyond the arc. But then, of course, Golden State was much better. Only they hit half of their 3-point shots, and I mean they started off strong. The first quarter they were up by 10. It looked like it was going to be a good thing for the Wizards, but then that second quarter and that third quarter, it all went downhill, and from there it was just no coming back from that. And unfortunately, there was nothing they could do from there. There was nothing they could do, even without Steph Curry, who's still recovering from a pretty severe knee injury. Golden State were still able to show why they're one of the best teams in the league, and were able to fight off this Wizards team.
All right, Arun, what were some of your thoughts on this one?
They didn't have much of a chance if they're going to give up 135 points. The defense was pretty bad. Plus, as Ken alluded to, that they were just hot from 3-point range. Dante DiVincenzo came off the bench, 5 of 8 from 3-point range. And the Wizards bench didn't really get it done, even though none had 13 points. I think most of those came in the first half. Beal and Porzingis had like 33 and 34 points, but I think actually Porzingis, he didn't really see the ball that much in the fourth quarter, and he could have easily had like 40 or 50 points if he could have kept it up. But for some reason the Wizards didn't really get him involved. And no Kyle Kuzma, no Steph Curry for the Warriors, though, and it just seems like the Warriors had the Wizards numbered this year.
Yeah. Let's just move on from or no, Tim, I'll get your thoughts real quickly on it, and then we'll get into the two more.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything's been said. Just the Wizards' defense was terrible in this game, and they haven't had the big three healthy enough, and they kind of need those big three to win a game like that, a tough road game. So
sounds good. All right, I'm gonna actually let you have the first crack at this next game. The Wizards came out strong in Portland, outscored them 31-27. And then they actually outscored them 28-25 in the second. And then they outscored them 38-22 in the third quarter, and then outscored them 29-27 in the fourth quarter to win 126-101. Tim, what are some of your thoughts on this game?
Again, like I was saying, the Wizards had the big three in this game, and obviously huge difference. Portland made some trades at the deadline, so some of their supporting players are different. Lillard had a good game overall, but their supporting cast struggled. And I really think the Wizards, I predicted this actually, not to shout out myself, but I did think this would be a revenge game, and we know these teams always win on the road against each other. So just kind of more sticking to the script here. Kuzma had a great game, and, just it was good to get a win and have a kind of stop that losing streak a little bit. But in the end, I think this was a good preview game of what the Wizards can be when they're healthy. So, if you want to be an optimist, this lineup could possibly sneak into the playoff mix if they stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, 50%, or shooting better than that from three, and 57% field goal is great. And just overall, lots of points in the paint, and just a really great effort. Ken, what are some of your thoughts on this game?
The big three they had 80 of the Wizards 126 points in this game. So clearly the big three, when they're healthy, they really make a difference when it comes to this team in terms of offensive scoring. And Kyle Kuzma coming back from injury and having 33 points coming back from injuries just shows how important he is to this team. And this was a great bounce back game for the Wizards coming off that loss to Golden State. They needed this win. They needed to be able to bounce back. They were able to go out there, shoot very well from the field, shoot very well from beyond the arc, and had everything put together to be able to come out with the victory. And I think the one key thing is something that I've always talked about on this podcast for the last couple of seasons, is that third quarter was the key, because they led through the first half, and in the third quarter they turned it on. It's almost like they very rarely trailed in this game, and that's why they were able to dominate this Trailblazers team and be able to walk away with that win.
Yeah, Arun, any final thoughts on this game?
Yeah, the Wizards pretty much got revenge on the Trailblazers. As Tim alluded to, the Trailblazers weren't the same team as just a week ago. Like, they had Thibault and Cam Reddish in the lineup, and they'd have Josh Hart. And Kevin Knox was also in the rotations. I think the Trailblazers are slightly worse. And Kyle Kuzma was much better in this game. He had only 12 points in the last game. In this game, he had 28 points through three quarters, and he finished with over 30. And the officiating was questioned by, I guess, the Trailblazers fans. But I think the flagrant foul was kind of the correct call. If you undercut somebody, you land under them. Even if it's not a straight and down motion, some people step forward when they shoot threes, and that probably should be called a flagrant. And the Trailblazers actually had more free throws. I saw a lot of Trailblazers fans complaining after the game about the officiating. But I think the Wizards are the better team, especially if the Trailblazers have Nurkic out. And it's good that they got revenge after blowing a 15-point lead, I believe, in the fourth quarter in the last game. So good for them to get the win.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into the last game before the All-Star break, which was a really interesting matchup. The Timberwolves came out on fire. They scored 36 points to the Wizards 21. Wizards kind of clawed back into it in the second, outscored them 30-23. But then the Timberwolves expanded their lead, outscored them by 3 in the third, 28-25. The Wizards did what had been done to them a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, where they were down 20 points and they're able to climb their way back into the game. And Kyle Kuzma had a terrible night shooting until he hit a three that mattered the most, that gave him a 1-point lead. And ultimately, they went on this big, it was at least a 10-0 run, and it was able to go from being down 8 to being up 8. And it's just a big run through the fourth quarter. Great team effort. They let Bradley Beal just go off. I believe he had 17 points in the fourth quarter, and just one of the best quarters for him this season. And just I like that Kyle Kuzma knew that it wasn't his night, but he still set Beal up, and they played to their strengths and let Beal kind of take over down the stretch, which you're going to have to do at some points. And just a really gutsy win. I'm going to start off with Tim. Tim, what are some of your thoughts on this one?
I really liked this comeback. I think it showed a lot of guts from the Wizards because they really didn't play with a ton of energy in the beginning of the game, which made sense because it was a lot of games on a difficult road trip. So you would expect a low energy game probably going into the All-Star break. But to get this comeback in the second half, it shows that they are going for it, I think, in the second half. So we can avoid our very common tank talk on this show for hopefully a couple more weeks. We'll see. But besides obviously the big three we've talked about, a lot of balanced scoring, and I think the Wizards are better, honestly, when Wright plays a lot of minutes as the point guard off the bench, because Morris he's a decent player, but I don't think he's a good starter. He's kind of like a very good backup or a very bad starter. So I like Wright to play a lot and just kind of switch it up. But yeah, just great to win against probably a playoff team and have some good momentum going into the next game.
Yeah, I loved being the team that caused the collapse versus the team that collapsed. And
big
it
role
was,
reversal.
Yeah, it was really a nice thing to finally see, especially going in to the All-Star break and listening to the coach talk about how important it is to get a win going into that week versus having a loss hang over you. And I think that they get to enjoy the All-Star break a little more, especially because we didn't have any All-Stars. So it was nice to
big swing game.
Yeah, big swing game momentum. Ken, what are some of your thoughts about this big comeback?
I think Tim said it best about balanced scoring. You had 6 players in double figures in this game. And yeah, it seemed like, the team was down and out, but that fourth quarter was major for this team, outscoring them 38-19. And that fourth quarter was the big difference in them being able to win this game. They were dominated in terms of points. They weren't dominated, but they fell short in terms of points in the paint, which is one of their strong suits. But they were still able to really grind out and scrap out this victory in order to be able to win and go into the All-Star break with that high of confidence, knowing that, okay, now it's time to really turn it up. It's really now time to push forward. And it's now time to really get serious and know that we got to make a push for the playoffs. And this is the win that they needed against a pretty talented Minnesota Timberwolves team.
The big stat that sort of stands out to me is if you look over here, 6 blocks and 13 steals, almost 20 combined blocks and steals. I think sort of you can kind of key into that can really change the momentum in a lot of games, and because it just gives us additional possessions, and it takes away possessions from the other team, so I thought that was an important part of the drive to get to the end where they made that big run. So I was just really pleased to see them. There's been some talk at the trade deadline here, or sorry, going to the All-Star break about big trades happening, as there always is. Westbrook was bought out by his contract, which was kind of expected. There was some talk that he might come back here. He ended up getting signed by the Clippers, which a lot of people are finding funny that he was bought out of an LA team. He gets to stay in LA and play for arguably a better team. Not even arguably, one is in the playoff position and the other is not even. Be interesting to see how Westbrook affects that team, because they were doing so well before having him come in, but maybe he can continue to be that bench role player and continue to play well for us. I know that John Wall is still out on the market. There's still a question about the guard play. Arun, what are some of your thoughts? Do you go for a John Wall for the minimum? Do you stick with what you got? Is there somebody else out there that you think we should go for? And what are some of your thoughts on this game?
I would probably say no to John Wall at this stage of his career, because he also pretty much dissed Tommy Shepard and Bradley Beal on a podcast recently, saying that Tommy Shepard is a snake. Also, he talked pretty badly about Leonsis. And it's also funny, he also talked a lot of crap about the Houston Rockets, and he's actually traded back to the Rockets shortly before they bought him out. So I think he may have burnt a lot of bridges. Maybe he mends them, but either way, he didn't do things on the Clippers, which is play defense or pass the ball that well. So I think his role would be similar, or like ideally he'd be a lower usage player and play defense, but I don't think it would really help the Wizards in that respect at this stage of his career after that injury. So I don't think they should bring him back. Best of luck to any team that does. And Westbrook, it was just funny that when the Clippers bought him out, some sports books actually had the championship odds of the Clippers getting worse. So that's something to look out for as well. As for this game, good for Beal to get, I think, 13 or 14 points in the last 4.5 minutes of this game. He actually outscored Anthony Edwards, who made the All-Star team after Edwards had a huge hot start. Mike Conley was scoreless, probably a big reason for the collapse, but Beal was just kind of clutch down the end, scoring over Gobert and over the long defense of the Timberwolves, and Kuzma with that clutch three. And the Wizards actually improved to 7-1 when all the big three play the whole game, since their 10-game losing streak. They're in between right now. They're the 9 seed. They're like a couple games out from perhaps a 6 seed, but they're also like a couple games out for being back in the tanking conversation. So if they continue to play well, they'll probably be in the playoffs, but they just have to stay healthy. That's probably the big thing.
Let's take a quick look at the upcoming schedule. Again, we're not doing a podcast next week, so I'm going to go over the next kind of 2-week schedule, and then I'm not going to have us break down every game, obviously, but I'm going to have you guys give your thoughts just overall on the upcoming schedule. So on Friday, we play the Knicks in Washington. It's a 7:00 game. On Sunday, we play a 3:30 game in Chicago against the Bulls. On the following Tuesday, we play the Hawks at 7:30 in Atlanta, and then we come back to Washington and we play the Raptors both on Thursday and Saturday. So both those games are in Washington against the Raptors. The Raptors are another team that are fighting in the standings. And then the Bucks come to town and play the Wizards on Sunday, March 5th. And so we'll recap all of those games. So yeah, here they are, the 6 games. I'll let each one of you guys kind of pick a game, or if you want to pick the set of Raptors games, that's fine as well. I'm going to start off with Tim. Is there a particular game or 2 games that you would like to talk about?
Sure. I'll just talk about the Raptors games real quick. And it's not only these Raptors games, but I think those are key. You know, the Wizards are, like Arun said, right on the edge of making it, into the play-in or even to the 6th seed, or missing the playoffs entirely and tanking. But when they play teams like the Raptors right near them in the standings, they're really like 2-game swings. So if they split those games, it won't mean a lot. But if one of the teams goes 2-0 in that kind of baseball type series, that makes a huge difference. So obviously the Raptors, I don't think people expected them to do a whole lot this year. They've been good for a while. They still have talent, and potentially the Wizards, though, will be favored in these games and are playing well. So I think the Wizards can take both. I think more likely it'll be a split, but those are really important games that I have, just have my eye on.
Yeah. It's interesting because we play a lot of these teams, the Hawks, the Knicks, the Bulls, the Raptors, a lot of these teams are right around where we're at. Ken, which game or two would you like to talk about for the Wizards?
I want to talk about the Bucks game because that's going to be a very difficult one. The Bucks are currently sitting in second in the Eastern Conference, and of course, Giannis is coming off his All-Star team winning the All-Star game, and what was a game. But coming off the rest, they're going to be hungry and ready to go and things like that. I think this is going to be one of their toughest games in the stretch of the next couple of weeks. And even though they're coming here to DC, it's still going to be tough. And it's going to be one of those games where the Wizards are going to have to be clicking on every cylinder they can, both offensively and defensively, if they're going to take down one of the best teams in the East. So that one right there, I cannot call that a win, but I would love it to be a win. Hopefully it will be a win, but I don't see it as a win.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting for sure. All right, Arun, which game do you want to, or games do you want to talk about?
I'll talk about the Knicks just because that's like I think a big barometer of how the probably post All-Star break will go, because usually the Wizards lay eggs and kind of when they have big amounts of rest. But I think the Knicks are a team that they can beat, even though the Knicks did upgrade their roster, acquiring Josh Hart. The Wizards did beat them by double figures in the last game at Madison Square Garden, but they also lost a couple of days before that. So it's kind of an interesting barometer. And plus, that's a team that currently has a 6 seed. So if they win that game, I think they could make a run for the 6 seed. But if they lose, maybe they'll be kind of in this purgatory, or maybe even back in the tanking conversation, especially if you lose to the Bulls. And then the Hawks is probably a really big game. They're also in the 8th seed, and their division foe. They play them 3 more times this year. They've been relatively disappointing. Atlanta, a couple of years ago, they made it to the conference finals, but they're in the play-in. They traded a bunch of first-round picks for Dejounte Murray, but the Wizards are pretty much right on their tail. And if the Wizards had better health, maybe they'd be ahead of the Hawks in the standings. But it's going to come down to the last 20 quarter of the season. I think 25 games. If the Wizards are going to be a playoff team, or they're going to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, if they want to be a playoff team, then I really feel like they got to try to find a way to win 4 out of these 6. And if not, then we may want to start thinking about tanking, because you really don't want to find yourself in that spot that's right outside of the playoff bubble. That doesn't really help us. And there's some pretty decent players in this year's draft. So I think these next 6 games, when we get back together and we discuss them, we'll go through this week briefly, and then we'll go more in depth into the Raptors and the Bucks one in 2 weeks. But it'll be interesting for sure to see how the Wizards do through these next 6 games. Let's talk about the All-Star game for a little bit. I'm going to stop the screen share there. The game itself, a lot of pundits are talking about maybe being the worst basketball game in history. And the 3-point shooting I thought was decent. I thought that was an interesting. Lillard won it, and that was kind of a fun competition. But for me, the dunk competition won it this year, and I'm happy to see that, because the last couple of years have been a little bit lackluster in the dunk competition. But I was really happy to see some fresh blood, if you will, in this one. I know, Tim, you didn't get to watch too much of the All-Star weekend, but I'll get Arun and Champ's thoughts on that. I'll start off with you, Champ. What are your thoughts on All-Star weekend for the NBA?
Denver Nuggets head coach Michael Malone said it best after the All-Star game. Quote, "It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be a part of a great weekend with great players, but that is the worst basketball game ever played. If that don't tell you a lot about this year's All-Star game, I don't know what will." The man was literally sitting courtside and watching this game. I couldn't even get through the first quarter of this game. I even said to you guys in our group chat, it felt like I was watching a live action version of NBA Jam. And if for those of you who may not be old enough to remember NBA Jam, trust me, it felt like that. I'm old enough to remember NBA Jam. I played many versions of NBA Jam, and it felt like NBA Jam. I was just not entertained. I was not interested. I literally DVR'd it and I couldn't get through the first quarter before I said, you know what? I can't watch this anymore. I'm bored. I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. The three-point shooting contest, yes, I agree with Robbie. The three-point shooting contest was okay. Damian Lillard, Dame Dollar made history being the first trailblazer to win the three-point contest. But the dunk contest was a lot better than what I've seen in the last couple of years. That kid from Philly, holy crap. His dunks were amazing. And here's the thing. A lot of the dunks in this dunk contest were so good. They were so good. That's what really made All-Star Weekend for me, was the dunk contest. The skills challenge with the Rooks, Team Giannis and Team Jazz, that was pretty cool and everything like that. That was cool. But the dunk contest really made All-Star Weekend because of the fact that I got to really see some really creativeness from a lot of these contestants in this competition. And that kid from Philly, oh my God, man, like those three dunks that he had 50s on were absolutely amazing, and dunks that I'd never really seen before. The one dunk where the dude came out from the sideline, stole the ball, and then did the alley-oop off the backboard, that was pretty creative as well. But all in all, the dunk contest definitely made All-Star Weekend for me.
Yeah, I wish I could show it live, but they will totally take it down off of YouTube later. So I'm not going to show the highlights, but I definitely think that people need to go back and watch the dunk competition. You just go to NBA's YouTube channel. They have a great video compilation, 10 minutes of just the dunk competition, or you can just watch Max dunks by themselves as well. They have them all clipped out, but definitely a highlight for me. I think the part of my big problem, we talked about it last week, is I kind of wish we'd go back to the East-West format, especially in these games. It was really hard for me to figure out who I wanted to root for, especially I was originally going to root for Giannis. And then he dunked and then went out immediately because I think he was injured and he just wanted to say, hey, I played in the All-Star game. And then LeBron got kind of injured and taken out. And then I was going to root against LeBron. And then I'm like, at this point, if neither captain and I don't have a Wizard playing in this game, it's really hard to see who I'm going to root for. And so thus I didn't really care about it. And also that XFL game was just so much better. I was DVRing both so I could rewind, but I was kind of watching out of the corner of my eye the All-Star game, and I was like, I don't care enough to go back to watching the DVR of this game. And all the pundits were saying the same thing. But Arun, what were some of your thoughts on the dunk competition and overall All-Star weekend?
Yeah, Mac McClung was great. The former Georgetown player. Apparently, Patrick Ewing may have run him out of town from Georgetown, and that's why he didn't finish his career in DC. But being from Virginia, that's pretty cool that Mac McClung was able to win. I believe he was the favorite in Vegas to win the slam dunk title, and he had a couple of really good dunks, including a 540 dunk, which he said he never tried before, but he was so amped in the moment that he was able to get it done. He kind of won, like, the national announcers over. Kenny Smith was kind of down on him, but then he was pretty happy with all four of the dunks. Even for some reason, he didn't get a perfect score on one of the dunks, even though
I still don't understand why he should have.
Yeah.
You know, that dunk where he didn't get a perfect score on it, that was BS.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa Leslie was responsible for that, I believe. WNBA dunker Lisa Leslie. Anyways, Yeah, like I think he's only the 9th player in NBA history to have 3 perfect score dunks, and he probably should have had 4. And overall, I think like even though a couple of these dunk contests, whatever the last dunk contest was horrible, and I think the game last year was better just because Curry was playing and the 3 pointers were good. But I guess you can have 2 good things. You can have a good All Star game and a good slam dunk contest, and the game was absolutely horrible. I think the picking of the players before they'd have time to practice together, and I may have heard it, but I think Giannis, him being out, he improves the defensive effort. He brings it defensively, and him being out really hurt the team, like just hurt energy on both sides. In the last All Star game in Utah, there were 67 fouls called. In this one, there were only 7 fouls. Just shows how little defense was being called. And then I think LeBron had the scoring record just recently broke, but it just makes me wonder, like, is the defense just that much worse in today's NBA? Like, does the scoring record just mean that much right now? Like, even though LeBron's had a great career, it's just defense is overall just really terrible in the All Star game. And I don't know how they fix it. Maybe they have to give players like more financial incentives. Like they gave $700,000 to charity, but I believe like Bradley Beal makes that in one game. Like maybe they need to like up the charitable donations or give like some financial incentive for players to try hard because they didn't bring it, or just make the games like just shorter because they only seem to try in the fourth quarter anyways. Maybe just have one quarter of basketball because that watching 4 quarters of that was kind of painful.
Or I don't know. I think there could be like a cool way where maybe there's 4 teams that play, kind of like what the NHL does, where like they have 2 teams of some starters, some reserves, play against each other in the first quarter. Second quarter, the other 2 teams play each other. So there's 4 smaller teams. Each team gets more playing time, and then the winner of that plays for a third quarter for like a championship. I think that maybe that could be a little more exciting. Like I like the 3-on-3 tournament style that they do in hockey. Maybe they could do something like that where
Yeah, they
same
did that on
number.
Friday night actually, and that was actually more entertaining than the All Star
Right,
game.
right, exactly. But maybe do it with the All Stars.
Yeah,
That's what made me think of it. Like, well, if it worked for that game and it was slightly more interesting, why not have that format all the way through? I don't know. It's worth trying because at least maybe you could find one of the 4 teams to root for, through the process. But I really found it hard to root for anybody in this one. So, anyway, kind of a dud. But I thought I would still encourage people to go check out that slam dunk competition for sure. I think that's going to be it for our NBA segment. I am going to switch it back for just a second and get each one of your guys' thoughts at 300 before we get out of here. But yeah, it's been a fun show so far, and I'm happy that I get to do it with all of you guys and have so many guests tonight on the show. But I'm just gonna go around in a circle and get each one of your guys' thoughts at 300 if there's any particular moment that stands out to you or anything that you wanted to point out before we end the show tonight. So I'm going to start off with Tim. Any thoughts on 300 shows? Is there any episode you particularly remember through that process?
I would say it wasn't. Well, actually, it probably was one of the most popular. But we did a show. Right before. I want to say it was like between game. Didn't you do one between Game 4 and Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals, or like right before Game 5? And you were just interviewing people about the run and everything, and it was just fun, like to talk about the Capitals then, and just have a lot of people talking more about like their memories of the Caps mostly losing in the past, but how special it was. So that was always a cool show because obviously you're not going to get a lot of big championships. You only get a couple in the show's history so far, which is lucky in itself. So I'm gonna remember that. But yeah, it's just also crazy, like all the ups and downs too. A lot of wins and losses, but
yeah,
that
even
one
for the Wizards, we've had some interesting runs. For
yeah.
them, I definitely. I think one thing that's kind of cool is we've had a championship in every sport except for soccer, where we had
Mystics.
Yeah, the
Basketball.
Mystics won it in basketball. You know, the Caps won it. We've got the Valor winning it in football. So and the Nats obviously as well. So it's just kind of be cool to do that. I'm hoping that the Defenders could be a team that could maybe surprise people this year. And if they gel at the right time, maybe they could be our next championship team. But Tim,
Yeah.
it's been so
Not the
fun.
Wizards this year. Come on, man. No, I'm just kidding.
It's possible. But it would be quite a run for sure. But
Capitals.
yeah, I think the Capitals, maybe for Ovechkin, Tim and I, went to school together, and I remember when EJ lost his dad, and our sports teams all went on a runs that year, if you remember. We did some pretty cool things and won a lot of games for
Oh
him.
yeah, high school
In high
times.
school.
Yeah,
So like it wouldn't shock me if it's a motivating factor for Ovechkin, and maybe he can find a way to motivate the rest of his team
that's
to do
true.
that. So we'll see how that all goes. But Tim, it's been a really awesome the first 300 episodes, and I'm
Yeah,
looking
man.
forward
Thanks
to
for having me.
I look forward to having more, and I'll have you back on in 2 weeks.
Definitely have a good one.
All
Talk
right,
soon.
sounds good. All
See
right,
ya.
Arun, you've been on since season one of our very first guests that were ever on this show. You've been through it all with us. Anything that sort of sticks out in your mind in these 300 episodes?
Yeah, kind of like from the beginning. Like I remember talking about college basketball, and then Villanova was kind of like the Washington Capitals. Like they would always like win a lot in the regular season, but then they would like usually bow out in the tournament. And I think that first year Villanova won the tournament. They
They
actually
did.
have like 4 NBA players now from that team, which is surprising at the time because I think both North Carolina and Villanova weren't supposed to have any NBA players. But then it turns out Villanova had like 4 NBA players. And then I guess like then the Caps like they eventually made that run pretty deep and they beat Pittsburgh down 2-1 and they won. They closed out every series on the road. And then the Nationals with a very unlikely title, winning every single game, the first team to win every single game on the road in the World Series. And then finally, I guess the Mystics was they were kind of supposed to win. I don't really recall. I guess like they had some adversity, but then the Valor was kind of interesting because I think they only had won like 4 regular season, like 4 out of 10 games, but they like won the title, which is hilarious. Like in the playoffs, that was a pretty funny title. So it's like overall just some unlikely DC teams winning titles, and hopefully that continues. Like even just like for even maybe down the line, maybe the defenders or even the Caps again or the Wizards would be. I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon, but that would be pretty awesome if they won.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a really interesting run, and it's cool to have you come on and talk so many different sports with us throughout the years. And it's been fun to be able to do this weekly with you. And I look forward, we'll come back and talk in March again, and we'll have a gear up to another March Madness, which is always fun to talk to the team about. So when we're back in March, we will talk Caps first, XFL. Then we'll do Wizards and then March Madness. We'll end with a double basketball segment, and I look forward to doing that once again with you, Arun. And thank you for being a part of this for all 7 seasons. It's pretty special to have you along for the ride, and I look forward to continuing to have you on the show in March.
Sure, thanks for having me on.
All right, champ. It has come down to the end. We're gonna have you give your thoughts on 300 episode, and then I definitely want you to let people know what's happening on the No Spots podcast this week.
I'll talk about No Spots in a minute, but my favorite moment from the 300 episodes of Sports on the Hill was when CP3 called his shot when the Commanders, then known as the Washington Football Team, went up against the Steelers, who were undefeated and dominant, and they were able to beat them. And CP3 was the only person to believe that they could do it, and he stood on that hill and was ready to die on that hill. And he didn't have to die on that hill because they were able to do it. And that was my favorite moment because he stood on his convictions and felt that that team at that time was good enough to beat that good of a Steelers team at that time. And so that was my favorite moment of Sports on the Hill was that. But a great job of you guys getting to 300. Our podcast, No Spots Podcast, is about a couple months away from hitting 200. So we're hoping to get there. We're going to be on episode 193 coming up on Saturday, where we will be recapping WWE Elimination Chamber that took place this past Saturday in front of a raucous and rowdy and amazing crowd in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. The first time that Montreal hosted a pay-per-view / premium live event in over 2 decades, and it was well worth the wait for them because they were absolutely amazing. We're going to talk about that, as well as all the fallout from that with Raw and SmackDown. Plus, AEW continues to build towards their next pay-per-view, which is Revolution, coming up in March. And Impact has an Impact Plus special coming up this week with No Surrender. We're going to talk about all of that this coming Saturday on twitch.tv/true No Spots Pod for the No Spots podcast. And make sure you check out Sports on the Hill, SportsOTHP.com. Click the Partners Podcast button, and you can listen to not only that audio, but previous audio from our previous podcasts.
That sounds great. Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming along for the ride with this. True Radio Network, we're kind of keeping the network alive. Rest in peace to Jason, for starting this amazing brotherhood of all these podcasters together. And I love watching you and Sith. I lurk a lot of your shows. I don't watch wrestling, so I don't have a whole lot to say in chat, but I definitely stop by a lot. I love the rapport that you guys have and your whole team over there. You've got a lot of great people over there, but it's just special for me to see Sith, who was one of the very first people to be guests on this show. And he was a big part of this show in the first couple of seasons, being a part of the different roundtables and things like that. And we'll have to try to get him on again, maybe March Madness or something in the near future. But it's great to see him over there, and the fact that the three of us, and Carol, can keep on doing it. I was hoping to get Hurt on tonight, but he's actually doing his poker thing tonight. But I know he congratulated us and wanted to be a part of it. And big shout outs to Hurt for taking a chance on us to get us on the network in the first place and being our first producer. So shout outs to Hurt and Hurt's House as well. Obviously a big part of our history and inspiration for creating this show in the first place. And without having Hurt's House, there is no Sports on the Hill podcast. And so I definitely want to give a shout out to some of those OGs and the legendaries. I want to give some shout outs in chat. We have a hype train that's actually close, and Tina just resubscribed for 6 months. And Peter, one of our biggest subscribers, who's subscribed for 13 months, who's just a supporter of me, which is super sweet, but he's actually never chatted in chat before. And he actually just chatted in chat for the first time, even though he's been a subscriber for 13 months. But I want to give him a special shout out for subscribing for all those years, and or for over a year now. And just for everybody for helping us be a part of this and to hit our subscriber goal of 15 for this 300th episode. I really appreciate everyone for being a part of this community here on Twitch. And
I do want to say also, Robbie, I do appreciate you and Carol for bringing me to your podcast to talk about something other than wrestling, which is the Wizards and also the Washington Commanders, because of the fact that, I am a fan of both of those teams. I was also a big follower of the Caps, but I kind of fell off from that. I need to get back on that because they're clearly doing some great things. But I do appreciate you guys for bringing me on and being a part of the Wizards Roundtable and giving me a chance to be able to be a part of something special with this podcast and being able to talk about something other than wrestling and showing my versatility in terms of talking about sports and things like that, and not just being a wrestling guy. Even though I've been a longtime wrestling fan, I know more than wrestling. I love football. I love I'm a fan of basketball, and I'm a fan of football. I mean, I do more than just wrestling. So I appreciate you guys for being able to show that I'm more than just a wrestling guy.
Yeah, no, it's one of my favorite moments that we haven't talked about so far in our 300th episode. It wasn't one of the episodes of the show, but I still consider it one of my top 10 favorite streams that I ever did. And that's the one where we actually got to go to a restaurant and have you and CP3 and an exciting game against, I believe it was the Dolphins, and we were at a bar and we got to do a show live on set and get some drinks and food comped, and it's still one of the coolest moments that we were able to have a sponsorship like that and go out and see people live and do a show out with the people. And I love being able to do that in person with you and CP3, but that was one of the greatest days of this podcast history.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I can't remember the name of that bar, but it was out in Fort Washington. And I remember doing that, doing a couple of those shows because I was living in Reston at the time. And that was a long drive coming from Reston all the way out to Fort Washington, but it was well worth it just to be able to hang out with CP3 and watch the Washington game, and then to be able to cover it before and then after. And those are some fun times as well. So those are times that I miss the most, is those shows.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to welcome Davey is eating a sandwich. He's excited to see you on. He says that you are, your stuff, wrestling or non-wrestling. And so I appreciate Davey. I was actually going to raid you tonight, Davey. Davey had a great guest on. I was hoping to get over there, but I did know that episode 300 was going to probably run long, just in the sense of we had so much to cover. But I'm happy that you had Chris Fox on. And I hope that people go check out that VOD. We'll probably end up going to KR Acoustic. Arun commented in our Twitch chat, RG3. So he had to get his RG3 reference in there at some point, even though he isn't live on air anymore. So I appreciate that. And
Davey, thank you very much for the compliment. I appreciate that. Definitely.
Yeah, Davey is great. I hope that people who are listening to the audio podcast go check out Davey's eating a sandwich on Twitch. He's been a big part of this show and an inspiration for me to continue to push this. He does a sports show, but he also does a sandwich eating show, which is a talk show, and a bunch of other shows out there. And it inspires me every time I go over there to try different things. And that's why, to celebrate 500 followers, I am going to do an art stream, because there has been a lot of people who have wanted to see me do some art, and I haven't gotten a chance to since October, if you could believe it, on Twitch. And so people want to catch a Mareep talking about Pokemon. There is one in chat right now. So any Pokemon that shows up in chat next week, I will draw, and anybody can come to chat next week, suggest a Pokemon, and I will add them to a mural and put maybe people's names on there as well to celebrate some of the big followers that we've had. And then there'll also be some redeems next week using channel points. People who are on the audio or on the Facebook side, they're probably, what's a channel point? But you can use points that you get by watching the show, and I'll let people redeem adding additional Pokemon and other things to the mural as well. And so it should be a lot of fun to do a little bit something different, talk a little news. We may give a little bit of updates on how the teams did, but not do it as in depth as we will. And we'll be back with episode 301 in March. With that, I think we're going to end the audio podcast and the Facebook podcast. But I really appreciate everyone for tuning in for this 300th episode. It's been a lot of fun. We had a ton of really awesome guests. We'll chat on Twitch for just a minute after the podcast is over. But I really appreciate everyone for joining us on Twitch and on Facebook, and however you listen to this show. But we'll be back again in 2 weeks for episode 301 of Sports on the Hill podcast. Thank you again to all of our wonderful guests tonight, whether it be that E Flat Guy, Ryan, joining us in the first segment, as well as the return of Carol and Gil, obviously, who's been phenomenal. In our second segment, to have Dujanay, Champ, and then Arun and Tim. It's just been awesome to have so many wonderful guests tonight, be a part of this show and the 300 shows forever. Jamie 888 says XFL forever. I'm happy that Jamie likes the XFL. I am curious what their team is. I'll get that in just a moment, but I appreciate everyone for tuning in. I'm going to end the Facebook Live there. We're DC Sports without the politics. Sports on the Hill podcast. This is episode 300. I hope you guys have a great 2 weeks.
Sayonara.
And then I'm gonna Oh, I never actually recorded on this computer. I took some risks with this one. I didn't do my backup to the backup recording, but luckily it looks like everything went well tonight. We're just on Twitch now, but it, he says XFL above all. Davey says, um, um, so, anyway,
He
so
Hate Me was the best player ever on the first integration of XFL. Rod Smart was amazing. That was the basis for my alter ego. They hate me. True
That's
story.
great. That's
True story.
awesome. Yes. Well, thank you guys for so much for tuning in here. I think we're gonna go over and rate our friend KR. Unless anybody in chat has a different suggestion, I'm always open to suggestions from chat if there's some place that we want to go. But we actually have 13 people in here, so thank you everyone for tuning in, whether you're lurking or been a part of the conversation. Oh, that E5 guy says, Robbie, I had a friendly bet with my friend of the year, RG3's draft class, that between him, Andrew Luck, and Russell Wilson, that Wilson would have the best career of the three. I think I won the bet, though both of the other two unfortunately dealt with injuries off the field stuff too. That I agree. Russell Wilson is the best. I think that unfortunately he's not in the best situation right now, but he chose to take money over loyalty, and sometimes that does not always work out for you. We'll see how that goes going forward. And David said that I'll catch the VOD later to see the rest of it. Yes, yeah, definitely. I'm going to split this into 3 segments. I'll have the Capitals and CP3 segment be one. I'll have the XFL conversation, not the Carroll part, but all the rest of it be a second segment. And then the basketball be a segment number 3. And I might not do that tonight because if you could believe it, I actually had a cold through this whole thing. But I was able to get through it. So I'm happy about that. And it's been a fun show. Yeah, it's been really fun. Thank you again, Ryan, for coming on. That was a lot of fun. We'll definitely have to have you on in the future. I don't know if you cover March Madness or if you follow that, but anybody that does do March Madness and wants to come on and talk about that with us, open invitation to all of our Twitch streamers and friends to get with me offline, and we can maybe bring some of you guys in to talk a little March Madness. So again, in March, we'll have episode 301, 302, and 303, leading up to 303 being our season 7 finale. It's also going to be our 7-year stream anniversary. Then we'll take a week off for spring break, and then we'll come back at the beginning of April when baseball season is back. I know that since CP3 isn't on the show, the baseball segment will be shorter than it was before. It'll just kind of be more of an update. But if people do want to come on and talk baseball with me, they're more than welcome to as well. But we'll have plenty to talk about with all the other sports in addition to that. Champ, any final thoughts before we start our raid?
No, I mean, great job of hitting 300. I'm hoping that, my podcast can get 300. We are a long ways away from that, but hopefully we get there and we can celebrate 300 and things like that. But great job of hitting 300. Great job of being able to cover DC sports without the politics, and great job of being unbiased, of being unapologetic about your coverage. I mean, there's nothing else to say. I mean, there's a lot of DC media that are very, very soft when it comes to their coverage of DC sports, whereas here we are not going to be soft on these DC teams, because not only are we covering them, but we're fans of these teams, and we're going to speak our minds on that, and that's what the great thing about this podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been good that we try the best we can to be a DC based podcast that we don't talk about politics. It's hard at times, but it's been something that's been really important part of who we are and our identity. And thank you again for being a part of this and part of the conversation. We're going to go over and rate our friend KR. We can have our raid and sub raid. Grab whatever applies to you. Let's go have some fun at KR. acoustics. I really appreciate everybody a part of this Twitch family for being a part of it. Again, come join us next week for our Pokemon art stream. I'm looking forward to that as well. And thank you everyone for making this first 300 episodes so special. And thanks again for helping me hit the 500 follower thing. We're going to hit the raid now button, but we'll talk to you guys either next week in the art stream or the following week on Sports on the Hill podcast. I hope you guys have a great week or two, and we'll see you all soon.
Arigato. Sayonara.